The sun hung low over the Arizona Badlands like a bruised peach, bleeding crimson across the cracked earth that hadn't known rain in 3 merciless months. Elias Thorne, a weathered cowboy whose calloused hands told stories older than the saguaros that clawed at the sky, stood on the porch of his crumbling ranch house, staring at the skeletal remains of his herd. 50 head of cattle, once the pride of his late father's legacy, now lay scattered like forgotten promises, bones picked clean by coyotes and vultures. The mortgage letter from the bank in Tucson fluttered in his fist, its ink smudged by sweat and despair. Foreclosure in 30 days, it sneered. Elias, 42 and hollow-eyed, felt the weight of generations pressing down on his Stetson. He'd fought Apaches, rustlers, and the devil himself in his youth, but this drought, it was a slow poison, stealing everything without a fight. As the wind whispered taunts through the mesquite, he sank to his knees, whispering a prayer to a God who'd long since turned his back. Little did he know, salvation was riding in on the horizon, wrapped in the unlikeliest of skins, a young Apache woman, fierce as the desert wind and kind as the rare spring bloom. Her name was Ayanna, daughter of the White Mountain Apache, with eyes like polished obsidian that held the secrets of canyons carved by ancient rivers. At 25, she'd seen more sorrow than most lifetimes allowed, her village ravaged by settlers' greed, her brother lost to a fever that no medicine man could cure. Exiled from her people for speaking out against the endless encroachments, whites claiming land that the spirits had guarded for eons, she wandered the fringes, trading herbs and stories for scraps of survival. That fateful afternoon, as thunderheads teased but never delivered, Ayanna crested the ridge on her pinto mare, her braids whipping like raven wings. She'd come for water, her canteen as dry as the arroyo beds, but the sight below stalked her cold. Smoke curled from a distant scrub fire, sparked by lightning that danced too close to the earth. Elias's ranch, Thorne's Folly, the locals called it, was a tinderbox, the dry grass a fuse waiting for the match. She could have ridden on. The white man's troubles were not her own. But as she watched the old cowboy slump in defeat, something stirred in her, a flicker of the humanity her elders had taught her to cherish, even in the face of betrayal. With a soft click of her tongue, she urged her horse down the slope, the fire's growl growing louder with every hoofbeat. Elias heard her before he saw her, the rhythmic thud of hoofs cutting through his misery like a lifeline tossed into a storm-tossed sea. He rose, shotgun in hand, old habits from border skirmishes dying hard, and leveled it at the approaching figure. "State your business, stranger," he barked, voice gravel rough from disuse. Ayanna reined in 10 paces away, her posture straight as an arrow, hands visible and empty. She met his gaze without flinching, her deerskin dress dusted with the red earth that bound them both to this unforgiving land. "Fire comes," she said simply, her English laced with the cadence of her native tongue. "Your home burns." Elias blinked, the shotgun wavering. Apaches didn't warn whites. They raided, or so the tales went. But there was no malice in her dark eyes, only urgency. He followed her pointing finger to the east, where flames licked the horizon, devouring the scrub toward his barn like a ravenous beast. Panic surged through him, his last hay bales, his tools, the faded photograph of his wife tucked inside. "God Almighty," he muttered, dropping the weapon. In that instant, as embers spiraled skyward, Ayanna dismounted with the grace of a deer, uncoiling a length of rawhide from her. "Saddlebag, we fight it," she declared, not a question but a pact. And just like that, in the shadow of encroaching doom, 2 worlds collided, not with bullets but with borrowed shovels and unyielding will. The air thickened with anticipation, the crackle of flames the only sound. Ayanna drew a breath, her voice clear and resonant, carrying across the valley like a prayer on the wind. He saved my brother. 4 words, simple as river stones, yet they crashed through the tension like a sudden rain, soaking the parched ground of judgment. Gasps rippled outward, warriors exchanging glances, elders leaning forward with hands clasped. Elias lifted his head, confusion etching lines deeper into his face. Saved her brother. He had no memory of such a deed, no tale of heroism to cling to in this his darkest hour. Nietzsche's eyes narrowed, his voice a whip crack. Daughter, speak plain, what madness is this? Awinita did not flinch. She stepped closer to Elias, her presence a shield against the encroaching shadows, and in the firelight, he saw the faint scar along her forearm, a thin white line like a crescent moon. 2 moons passed. During the green moon when the wildflowers carpet the canyons, she began, her words weaving a tapestry that held the tribe captive. My brother, Taza, only 10 summers, wandered too far chasing a jackrabbit. The flash flood came without warning, the arroyo swelling like an angry spirit. He clung to a mesquite root, the waters roaring black and hungry below. I heard his cries from the ridge, but the current was too swift, I could not reach him. The camp leaned in, memories of lost children stirring like ghosts among them. Awinita's voice trembled now, not with fear, but with the raw edge of gratitude long unspoken. I ran for help, but the warriors were hunting far afield. Then, from the mist of the storm, a rider appeared, not one of ours, but a white man on a bay mare, his hat sodden, his face streaked with mud. He did not hesitate. He spurred his horse into the torrent, rope in hand, and lassoed the branch where Taza clung. The waters tugged at him, pulling horse and man alike, but he held fast, inching backward until he could haul my brother to safety. Taza coughed and shivered in his arms, alive because of this stranger's courage. Elias's mind reeled, fragments of memory surfacing like bubbles in a disturbed pond. The storm, yes, the blinding rain that had turned the trail to slurry, forcing him to seek shelter in the canyon. The boy's cry, faint over the thunder, pulling at something deep within him, a paternal instinct he thought buried with his son. He had acted without thought, without question of tribe or tongue, only the primal urge to save a life teetering on the brink. The boy had scampered away, wide-eyed and wordless, vanishing into the scrub as Elias collapsed against his horse, drenched and drained. He had ridden on, assuming it a fleeting mercy in a merciless world, never dreaming their paths would cross again under stars such as these. The revelation hung in the air, a bridge spanning the chasm of suspicion. Warriors who had moments before gripped their weapons now lowered them, their posture softening like yucca after frost. An elder, her face wrinkled as canyon walls, nodded slowly. The spirits move in circles, unseen. Whispers turned to questions, then to a low hum of recounting. Taza himself pushed forward by his mother, the boy pointing at Elias with a mix of awe and recognition. The water man, he pulled me from the river's mouth. Nietzsche's shoulders, rigid as lodgepoles, eased imperceptibly. He turned to his daughter, searching her face for deceit, but found only truth, bright as the morning star. Yet the moment teetered, fragile as a spider's thread. Old wounds festered deep. Mercy was not easily granted in a land scarred by iron and fire. A burly warrior, scarred from battles with Mexican lancers, stepped forward, his voice gravelly with doubt. One act does not erase the shadow of many. What if he brings the soldiers here, trailing like coyotes after a kill? Murmurs of agreement swelled, the tide of judgment threatening to surge anew. Elias felt the rawhide tighten, his pulse a war drum in his ears. He met Awinita's gaze, saw the plea there, not for his life alone, but for something greater, a mending of the frayed fabric between worlds. It was then that the unexpected turned, a profound realization dawning not just on Elias, but rippling through the assembly like dawn's first light. Awinita raised her chin, her voice gaining strength, laced with the quiet authority of one who had stared down death. Father, hear me, this man did not ask for thanks that day. He rode into danger for a child he did not know, of a people he feared as much as we fear his. In his eyes, I saw not the conqueror, but the father, grieving, alone, extending a hand across the flood. If we spill his blood now, we drown not just him, but the spark of humanity that binds us all. The Great Spirit does not measure by skin or tongue, but by the heart's hidden rivers. Her words struck like lightning, illuminating truths long buried under layers of resentment. Elias, listening, felt a dam break within him. For the first time since Sarah's grave, he saw not his isolation, but connection, a thread of selflessness woven through strangers' lives. He thought of the Apache boy, Taza, whose white eyes mirrored Tommy's, and realized that in saving him, Elias had salvaged a piece of his own shattered soul. The tribe, too, stirred with recognition, memories of white traders who shared tobacco without demand, of soldiers who turned blind eyes to hidden camps. Not all were enemies. Humanity's power lay in those overlooked mercies, the quiet acts that defied the divide. Nietzsche stood motionless, the weight of leadership pressing like the mountain above. His gaze drifted to Awinita, pride mingling with the ache of a father who knew the cost of compassion in turbulent times. Then, slowly, he extended a hand to Elias, the guard stepping back as if released by an unspoken command. "Rise, water man," the chief said, his tone gruff but laced with newfound respect. "The circle turns. You have given life. Now, receive it." The rawhide fell away, and Elias stood on trembling legs, the camp erupting in a chorus of voices, some wary, others warm, all threaded with possibility. But the night was not yet done with its transformations. As the fires burned low, Awinita led Elias to the chief's teepee, where Nietzsche waited with a pipe of sacred tobacco. The three sat in the glow of embers, the smoke curling upward in lazy spirals, carrying prayers to the star ancestors. Elias spoke haltingly of his losses, of the endless trail that had led him here, not as an invader, but as a seeker of solace. Nietzsche listened, his face a mask cracking to reveal the man beneath, the widower himself, his first wife taken by cholera in the reservation years. "We are all wanderers in the desert of Brief," the chief murmured, passing the pipe. In that shared silence, bonds formed, fragile as new shoots but rooted deep. Word of the mercy spread through the camp like wildfire on dry grass. Children approached Elias shyly, offering bits of fry bread wrapped in corn husks, their laughter a balm to his weary spirit. Taza shadowed him, chattering in a mix of Apache and broken English, demonstrating how he now swam the arroyos with the confidence of one reborn. Even the doubting warrior, after a long pull from the peace pipe, clapped Elias on the shoulder, grunting, "Next flood, we ride together." Awinita watched from afar, her heart swelling with a quiet joy she hadn't known since her mother's passing. In Elias, she saw not just a savior, but a mirror to her own unspoken longings, for a world where kindness bridged canyons wider than any river. As dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of rose and saffron, the emotional climax crested like a wave held too long at bay. The tribe gathered at the valley's mouth, where Elias's mare had been recaptured and returned, her coat brushed to a shine by young hands. Nietzsche stepped forward, his voice booming across the assembly. "This man, once judged, now walks free, not as guest, but kin. But freedom alone is a hollow gift. Elias Kane, you carry the weight of your people's sins, as we carry ours. Will you aid us, as we aid you?" Elias hesitated, the cold at his hips suddenly foreign, a relic of division. Then, looking to Awinita, whose eyes held the steady light of trust, he unbuckled the holster and laid it at the chief's feet. "I will," he vowed, his voice steady for the first time in moons. "Not with guns, but with hands open. Teach me your ways of the land, and I'll share what little I know of the trails beyond." The act of surrender, of laying down arms not in defeat, but in generosity, ignited the spark. Cheers rose, mingling with chants to the morning star, and in that moment, compassion bloomed transformative. Elias knelt, accepting a beaded armband from Awinita's hands, its pattern of interlocking feathers symbolizing unity. The tribe encircled them, voices rising in harmony, a song of healing that echoed off the cliffs. For Elias, it was redemption, a lifeline pulled from his own flood of despair. For the Apache, it was hope, a reminder that selflessness could rewrite fates etched in blood. Days blurred into weeks, the valley becoming a crucible of shared labors. Elias learned to weave baskets from yucca, to track game by the whisper of wind in the grass, his calloused hands adapting to tools of sinew and stone. In return, he sketched maps of safe passes through the Sierra Madres, warning of army patrols and offering stories of distant rivers teeming with salmon. Awinita became his guide, her laughter a melody that chased shadows from his dreams. One evening, as they sat by a stream, polishing arrowheads under the gibbous moon, she spoke of her fears, the encroaching railroads, the vanishing buffalo, the erosion of traditions like sand through fingers. "We fight to survive," she said softly, "but survival without heart is just enduring." Elias nodded, tracing the scar on her arm with a gentle, finger, the same one that mirrored the faint mark on his palm from hauling Taza free. I thought I was enduring too, after Sarah and Tommy, but you showed me, kindness isn't a weakness. It's the root that holds the tree in storm. Their hands met, tentative as fawns at water's edge, and in that touch, a profound realization settled. Humanity's power lay not in conquest, but in these quiet intersections, where one soul's generosity watered another's drought-stricken spirit. Unexpected turns came softly, like rain in monsoon season. One dawn, scouts returned with news of a cavalry patrol probing the borders, their bugles a harbinger of raids. Panic flickered through the camp, but Elias, drawing on memories of frontier skirmishes, proposed a ruse, herding decoy mustangs to draw the soldiers into a box canyon, where Apache archers could turn them back without bloodshed. Nitsch agreed, and under cover of dusk, the plan unfolded. Elias rode at the fore, his voice a steady call to the ponies, leading the bluecoats on a merry chase while Awinita and the warriors flanked unseen. Arrows sang not to kill, but to warn, embedding in saddles and wagon wheels, forcing retreat with tails tucked and egos bruised. The victory was bloodless, a testament to cunning over cruelty, and the tribe's respect for Elias deepened into brotherhood. Taza, ever the shadow, gifted him a small bow carved from cedar, whispering, "Now you're one of us, water man." Even Nitsch, in private moments by the fire, shared tales of his youth, raids not born of hate, but necessity, and the rare truces forged over shared smokes with Comanche foes. "We are all children of the same sun," the chief reflected, his eyes distant. "It is the darkness we choose that divides us." As autumn winds carried the scent of ripening mesquite, Elias faced another turning point, one that tested the mettle of his newfound kin. Word arrived via a wandering Navajo trader. Elias's old homestead in Texas had been claimed by kin, a letter awaiting him in Santa Fe with deeds to the plot and a modest inheritance, enough to start anew, to build a life beyond the wanderings. Temptation gnawed at him, visions of a cabin by a creek, fields golden with wheat, a chance to honor Sarah's memory in fertile soil rather than arid stone. He confided in Awinita during a solitary walk along the ridge, the valley sprawling below like a quilt of earth tones. "I could go back," he admitted, voice thick with conflict. "Plant roots, find peace in the familiar. But leaving here, it feels like abandoning the only family I've known since the fever." Awinita stopped, turning to face him, the wind tugging at her feather. Her eyes, deep pools of understanding, held no judgment, only the gentle prod of truth. "Peace isn't a place, Elias. It's the choice to water the seeds where they fall. You've given us your strength. Now, what does your heart ask in return?" The question hung, profound as the canyon's echo, forcing him to confront the selflessness blooming within, a realization that true generosity demanded not sacrifice, but presence, the daily act of showing up for others as they had for him. That night, under a canopy of stars thick as scattered seeds, Elias made his choice. He burned the letter's proxy in the council fire, ashes swirling upward like released burdens. Nitsch watched, nodding approval, and the tribe marked the moment with a feast. Venison roasted over piñon, corn mush sweetened with wild honey, songs that wove tales of heroes who chose heart over horizon. Awinita's hand found his in the shadows, a silent vow, and for the first time, Elias laughed freely, the sound mingling with the crackle of flames, a harmony of healing. Winter crept in on paws of frost, blanketing the valley in rare snow that glittered like crushed quartz. The cold tested them, game scarce and winds howling through passes like mournful spirits. Elias's knowledge of settler traps proved invaluable, snares baited with sagebrush luring rabbits from burrows, lean-tos reinforced with his roped canvas shielding tippus from gales. In quieter hours, he taught Taza to read the trader's English scrawls, the boy's finger tracing letters with wonder. "S-O-N, Taza spelled, grinning. Like the sun that warms us." Elias's throat tightened. In the child, he reclaimed echoes of Tommy, selflessness turning loss to legacy. One blizzard eve, as flakes danced like feathers from the Creator's wing, Awinita fell ill, a cough that rattled her frame, born of chilled lungs from a scouting run. The medicine man chanted over her, smudging sage to drive out spirits, but fever held fast. Elias sat vigil, bathing her brow with snow melt, his hands steady despite the terror clawing his chest. Memories of Sarah's sickbed flooded him, the helplessness, the prayers whispered to indifferent heavens. But here, in this teepee aglow with tallow lamps, he found strength in community. Nitsch paced outside, his silhouette a sentinel, while women brought poultices of willow bark, their murmurs a lullaby of solidarity. As dawn broke, gray and hesitant, Awenita stirred, her eyes fluttering open to meet Elias's. "You stayed," she whispered, voice hoarse but warm. He brushed a damp strand from her forehead, the gesture intimate as a heartbeat. "Where else would I be? You've changed everything for me." Those 4 words, that truth. "Now, let me return it." In her recovery, the climax of compassion crested anew. Elias foraged deep into the storm-swept canyons, unearthing a hidden cache of dried chokecherries known only from his wanderings, their tart juice a tonic that eased her cough. The act, small yet profound, wove tighter the threads of their bond, transforming individual survival into collective grace. Spring returned triumphant, wildflowers exploding in riots of color, paintbrush red as cardinal wings, lupine purple as twilight skies. The tribe's herds fattened on new grass, and with them, hopes swelled. Elias and Awenita's courtship unfolded like a river finding its course, stolen glances during communal hunts, hands brushing over shared looms, stories exchanged under cottonwood shade. Nige observed with a father's wary blessing, seeing in Elias the selflessness that mirrored his own youth's ideals. One golden afternoon, by the same stream where Taza had nearly drowned, Elias knelt before Awenita, a ring fashioned from twisted silver and turquoise held forth. "Marry me," he said, voice rough with emotion, "not to claim you, but to walk beside, to build a life where kindness is our compass." Tears traced paths down her cheeks, joyful as summer rain. "Yes," she breathed, and their embrace sealed a union that bridged worlds, Apache and Cowboy, ancient and new, bound by humanity's unyielding light. The wedding was a tapestry of traditions. Niche's blessings in the old tongue, Elias's vows sworn on Sarah's locket, dances that swirled under stars until feet ached and hearts soared. Taza strewed petals of desert marigold, diggling as elders shared body jests, the night alive with the power of togetherness. Years folded like the wings of a resting eagle. Elias and Awenita's home rose on the valley's edge, a sturdy adobe fused with teepee frames, symbol of blended lives. Their daughter, born under a harvest moon and named Saria after lost mothers, toddled through the camp, her laughter a bridge for weary hearts. Taza grew tall, a warrior with a scholar's mind, trading pelts for books in far towns, his English laced with Apache proverbs. Even the scarred warrior, now an uncle figure, taught Elias the bow, their arrows finding targets side by side. Challenges came, as they do to all, droughts that cracked the earth, whispers of relocation orders from distant capitals. But each trial forged them stronger, acts of generosity their shield, Elias bartering with Mormon settlers for seed corn, Awenita mediating with Navajo kin for shared grazing rights. In one fierce summer, when locusts stripped the fields bare, the tribe pooled what little remained, each family contributing a measure of meal, a string of jerky, until none went hungry. Elias, remembering his empty cupboards after the fever, organized a caravan to the Gila River, returning with wild rice and tales of alliances forged over campfires. Through it all, the 4 words echoed, Awenita's voice a lodestar, "He saved my brother." They became legend in the valley, retold around fires to wide-eyed young ones, a parable of how one moment of selflessness could cascade into rivers of change. Elias, braying at the temples, often sat with Nige on the ridge, pipes blowing as they watched eagles soar. "I came as a stranger," Elias would say, judged and found wanting. "But kindness, it's the real frontier, untamed and endless." Nige would chuckle, deep and resonant, "And we, who judged, were schooled by a fawn's wisdom." The Great Spirit smiles on such lessons. As Elias's life waned, like autumn leaves drifting to earth, the valley gathered one last time. He lay in the adobe, surrounded by kin, Saria at his side, her hand in his, Taza reciting verses from a worn Bible traded long ago, Awenita's fingers tracing the scar on his palm. "You changed everything," she whispered, tears glistening. "Not just for us, but for me. In your selflessness, I found my own." Elias smiled, breath shallow but eyes bright. "We all did, love, kindness. It's the spark that lights the dark. Carry it forward." His last exhale was peaceful, a sigh released to the winds, his spirit joining the ancestors under the vast Apache sky. The tribe mourned with songs that climbed the cliffs, but joy tempered the grief, a celebration of a life that embodied humanity's quiet power. Awenita planted a young mesquite by his grave, its roots to draw deep from hidden waters, a living testament. Years later, Saria, Now a woman with her mother's fire and father's steadiness would bring her own children to the tree, recounting the tale of a cowboy judged by warriors of 4 words. That turned judgment to justice, of compassion's cascade that watered deserts of the soul. And in that story, passed from lip to ear across generations, listeners, from dusty ranch hands in Texas saloons to urban dreamers in New York tenements, found resonance. For in every heart beats the potential for such transformation, a single act of generosity, unexpected as dawn, profound as stars, reminding us that we are all kin under the same sun. In a world quick to divide, let kindness be the 4 words that change everything, bridging chasms, healing wounds, igniting hope eternal. For in selflessness, we discover not just survival, but the true song of being human, uplifting, unbreakable, forever reaching toward the light. The ride to the White Mountains was a pilgrimage of 2 spirits mending. They traveled light, Ayanna's mare and Elias's old bay, cutting through canyons where echoes carried prayers. Along the way, unexpected turns wove their path, a flash flood that nearly swept them into a roiling wash, forcing them to cling to scrub roots, laughing through chattering teeth at their soaked absurdity, a band of wary scouts from her tribe who mistook Elias for foe, only to lower bows when Ayanna vouched with tales of the cowboy who danced with flames. Each trial deepened their bond, revelations blooming like night jasmine, Elias admitting his scouting days' regrets, the faces of Apache warriors he'd never forgotten, Ayanna sharing the lullabies her mother sang, melodies that wove loss into legacy. By the time they crested the final pass, the village unfolding below like a quilt of wickiups and wildflowers, Elias felt transformed. The man who'd knelt in defeat now stood tall, his heart a hearth for others' hopes. The elders gathered under the council ramada, faces etched with the dignity of survivors, skepticism hardening their gazes at the outsider. Ayanna translated as Elias spoke, his words plain but potent, "I come not as conqueror, but debtor. This woman saved my home when the world sought to burn it. Now, I stand for yours." He unrolled a map pilfered from the Tucson land office, marking boundaries with a miner's pencil, recounting Crow's alliance, the power of unified voices. Murmurs rippled, doubt yielding to dawning light, when he pledged his ranch as collateral for their legal fight, donating acreage for a communal well. Gasps echoed like wind through pines. It was more than land, it was restitution, a gesture of humanity reclaiming what greed had stolen. Cheers traced the elders, sheiks, and Ayanna's hand found Elias's, squeezing with unspoken thanks. In that circle of firelight, as psalms rose to the stars, Apache chants mingling with a cowboy's off-key hymn, the transformative impact rippled outward. Words spread like monsoon seeds, a white rancher bridging the unbridgeable, turning enmity to alliance. Petitions flowed to capitals, headlines in dusty broadsheets hailed, the desert packed. Months later, as spring vertered the Badlands into emerald promise, Elias and Ayanna stood on the ridge where it all began. The ranch thrived, herds swelling under shared pastures, her village secured tenure through a court won by improbable advocates. The line he'd uttered, "You saved my ranch, now I owe you more than gold," had evolved into a mantra, etched on a plaque above the new well that quenched both Apache and Anglo thirsts. "What now?" Elias asked, his arm brushing hers, the air humming with unspoken futures. Ayanna smiled, that radiant curve that outshone canyons at dawn. "We keep the river flowing. Kindness for kindness, story for story." He nodded, pulling her close, the desert wind carrying their laughter toward horizons unbound. In the end, it wasn't gold or guns that tamed the wild heart of the Southwest, but the quiet power of one hand extended to another. In a world quick to divide, by blood, by borders, by the scars of yesteryear, Elias and Ayanna's tale whispers a timeless truth. Humanity's greatest strength lies not in conquest, but in compassion's unyielding flame. It burns brighter than any wildfire, warmer than any hearth, reminding us that we are all wanderers on shared earth, owing one another more than we can ever repay. And in that debt, we find not chains, but wings, lifting us toward a hopeful dawn where rivers run deep, and no one stands alone.